please put your iPads and stuff away, get a pen out.
This is for Ben Parr purposes.
Of course.
What time?
No, I'm saying we have it west on 11/14.
Oh, me neither.
So,
How do you know my house?
guys, we are now on the 11th day in the 11th month, and we have been in school for several months. Every Sunday night, for the most part, like, I think there was one weekend where I messed up and I didn't get published, and so I ended up publishing it the next morning, like 6:30 in the morning. Every Sunday, I publish a look at what's gonna happen in the book, okay? And that's, you know, one of those situations where I would expect for you guys to check your email. You know, maybe when you get here on Monday morning, take a look at things. You know, I'm saying this is I don't want you to be in a position where you're like, I didn't know we had a quest. When did he announce we had a quest? You know, like I make it very clear, okay, and I don't pull, hey, we're gonna have a test tomorrow kind of stuff on you. I never do that, ever. Okay? So, we do have a French absolutism and 30 Years War quest. Really, it's going to be about 50 points, so it's on the high end of a quest, low end of a test. Okay? That's going to be on Thursday. Okay? We are going to finish the 30 Years War, probably going to finish it today with a review of the material on Wednesday before you take the quest on Thursday. And then you do have a chapter notes assignment that I'm going to post. I'll probably publish it tomorrow. It's due on the 19th. I'm just going to go ahead and put it up here so you know that it's coming. Okay? Go ahead and clear your desks. Don't need the iPads out. I don't know what are you recording?
Ben Parr is absent.
Hey, Parr. We're going to pause your video for a little while. Bye. All right. Where we left off, the Danish phase has ended. Now, just a brief review here. With Wallenstein raiding regions of central and even northern central Germany, or what would be Germany today, northern and central regions of the Holy Roman Empire, Saxony in particular, King Christian IV of Denmark, okay, will come down from the north, and he attempts to use it as we are protecting those who are innocent, caught in the crossfire of this ridiculousness. But in reality, this was somewhat of a power grab for Christian IV, or at least an attempted power grab. But Wallenstein will unleash his forces on Christian IV, and this phase will be short. The Danes were not very effective, and they will be outmatched. And the Treaty of Lubeck will be signed in 1629. The Treaty of Lubeck, the result here is that the Danes will not involve themselves in, you would call it, German affairs going forward. And they still, to this very day, have maintained that for the most part throughout history. Yes?
If, say, in modern day, could Denmark technically go against German
I
policy?
mean, sure, like now, yeah, sure. I mean, even any time prior to now, they could have. But that would mean, I just am trying to point out that this seems to have trivially lasted. That's all I was trying to point out. So, Ferdinand II, all right, seeing that Wallenstein was successful against the Danes and pretty much mopped up what had already been phase one, which was the Bohemian phase, where the German Protestant Union was absolutely just blasted. Wallenstein's success has encouraged Ferdinand II to say, maybe I can utilize this situation. Maybe I can reverse the course of the Holy Roman Empire.
how can I turn back time, perhaps even almost like withdrawing my support of, or withdrawing my adherence to the Peace of Augsburg. Maybe I can reverse it all. And so outlawing outright Calvinism and other sects of Christianity is a thought. Allowing only Catholicism and Lutheranism to exist is a thought that Ferdinand II moves upon. He issues what's called the Edict of Restitution. Again, we learn about these words in AP Euro, things like treaty, things like things like treaty, things like edict, things like a concordat, right? These are all words of diplomacy that represent various decrees and agreements. This edict, all right, is an outright declaration. An edict is a declaration. And it's called literally the Edict of Restitution. What are you doing when you are restituting something? You are restoring something, right? So in 1629, he issues it. In it, it outlawed Calvinism. It outlawed other groupings of Christianity besides Lutheranism and falls back to the Peace of Augsburg. But even with that, he demands that all lands that had been acquired by Lutherans, once belonging to the Catholic Church, be returned to the Catholic Church. Meaning, if you were a German prince who had decided you were going to be Lutheran and break away from the Holy Roman Empire, and there was a significant property ownership that you immediately inherited because of this declaration that you assumed control of. Now, in the midst of your region, you were going to have to give that back to the Catholic Church. This is an extremely bold move, all right? Because it clearly marks the height of Habsburg power in Europe, where we thought that the Habsburgs were kind of on the way out. This seems to be that moment of like a bounce of renewal, all right? Because Ferdinand's got who in his corner? Ferdinand's got muscle. What's the muscle? Wallenstein's army, right. Many now feared that Wallenstein would be unleashed and that he was capable of enforcing the new policy, that there were those that feared that Ferdinand II would unify the Holy Roman Empire completely and assume enormous power. I think you guys can figure out who I'm hinting at here, because we've kind of already talked about this on a grand continental scale. Who was in power during this time period that would eventually act actively against other Catholics is what I'm referring to here. Actively work against Ferdinand II out of a fear or a precaution to keep the Habsburgs down.
The Pope.
No, that's a good guess, but it wasn't the Pope, although the Pope, the French. Okay, the French. This is a time period of Cardinal Richelieu. Between that of Henry IV and Louis XIII, this is the time period of Cardinal Richelieu. And Cardinal Richelieu in France will go to great lengths to try and keep the Habsburgs from reunifying. Okay, are you with me here? So, but at what cost? How powerful could Wallenstein become? Many in Ferdinand II's own cabinet or advisory group themselves began to whisper that the emperor relieved Wallenstein of his power and duties as well. So there wasn't just an external threat felt by Wallenstein, like Richelieu, who was afraid, and we know, or maybe you don't know, Richelieu is going to involve himself in this war as a proxy, or find a proxy. We'll talk about who that is in a minute. But also internally, we see Ferdinand II's attack dog, Wallenstein, being feared by people within Ferdinand II's own advisory, because they were afraid that Wallenstein was going to essentially usurp Ferdinand II in the throne. that Wallenstein would somehow try to take over the region as a dictatorship. Eventually, Ferdinand II agrees with them and relieves Wallenstein of his duties. He's sent packing. He is retired, quote unquote. Okay? Around that same time that Wallenstein is relieved of his duties by Ferdinand II, we have the emergence of the third phase of this war. As I just mentioned, right? Political reasons are now going to surpass religious reasons for the conflict. Started off as a religious civil war, now it's become all about politics. The Swedes, up there in the north, right? The Swedes, for years, have been working to secure trade and territorial control in Northern Europe. Sweden, for its part, was a pretty successful economic power. They had benefited greatly from their fisheries in the Baltic as well as the North Sea. They had grabbed a large amount of land and assumed political power and secured political allegiance from several peoples. Portions of Finland as well as portions of Norway belonged to Sweden. As you can see on my map here, Sweden back then was much larger than it is today. Okay, here's Sweden today, right? Well, here's the Sweden today, right? And they're about double the size they were, or excuse me, they're about double the size then as they are now. They took pretty much Finland and portions of Norway as well. So, the King of Sweden, this guy, Gustavus Adolphus, all right, King Gustavus Adolphus, announced a plan to enter the fight against the Habsburgs. What we know now is that the French were prodding him to do so. As a matter of fact, the French under Richelieu were paying him to be involved. The Swedes, all right, under Gustavus Adolphus had an army of over 100,000 men, and the king hoped that he could involve himself in this chaotic situation in Central Europe to claim something that the Swedes did not have on this map. If you notice, on this map, ignore this stuff here that I'm encircling with my cursor. Can you see the map? Right? Do you see what I'm encircling here along the coastline of Northern Europe? They did not have possession of those items. What they wanted was warm water ports here along the edge. Right here, guys. What the Swedes wanted was warm water ports here along the edge of Northern Europe's mainland. They did not have that. Gustavus Adolphus uses that as the reason for him to get involved. Meanwhile, what we know now as well is that the French under Cardinal Richelieu threw tons of money and weapons at the Swedes to assist them in attacking the Holy Roman Empire. Why? Why would Richelieu, a Catholic cardinal and regent of the Catholic crown of France, throw wealth, in terms of money and weapons, at the Swedes to attack another Catholic nation next door?
Because the whole country was not completely Catholic.
No, it has something more to do with the political order or the balance of power in Europe at the time. The French wanted to stay powerful, and they were going to do whatever it takes to lower the Holy Roman Empire a few pegs. And so this is their arch rival. They'll do anything they possibly can to get at their arch rival. To put it in terms of today, this would be like Cathedral giving game tape to Roncalli to get at Chittard. Does that make sense for you football-minded people over here? Perhaps, I don't know, maybe other sports as well, basketball, you know, any sport, really. This is a matter of pride that the French hold against the Holy Roman Empire. There's a deep hatred between the Habsburgs and the French. Okay? So, Richelieu would have viewed this action as legitimized by something called raison d'etat. And I think most of you remember when we talked about that. What does that phrase mean? Didn't we talk about this?
No.
Okay, well we had. Raison d'etat is a policy. I'll spell it for you. Don't get too talky, guys, please, thanks. Okay, that causes others to be distracted. You start talking, then others start talking. All right, raison d'etat. Raison d'etat, reason of the state. Okay, raison d'etat. Can you guys still see it?
No.
Raison d'etat, what is it? Reason of the state is what it translates to mean. Richelieu used this policy, okay? Richelieu used this policy to legitimize his action of giving money and troops to the Swedes to fight against the Holy Roman Empire. When, truth be told, those actions would have been sinful when viewed through the eyes of a Catholic lens. Okay? You're giving money and weapons to non-Catholics, because the Swedes were Lutheran. You're giving money and weapons to non-Catholics to fight a religious-based, quote-unquote, war against Catholics when you're Catholic. That doesn't sound right. Okay, now, Richelieu, in raison d'etat terms, said it was a necessary evil. And because it would have been sinful for a person to do this, but not a state to do it. All that is the decision-making of Richelieu was to make France powerful because he was a regent for the crown, and the boy king, Louis XIII, was not yet old enough to take the throne. So Richelieu is just saying, I'm just trying to maintain the position of power that France has for the child. Right? In reality, it's I want France to have a leg up, and I want to weaken the Habsburgs, our old arch rivals. So, while anticipating the campaign and French assistance, Ferdinand II requests Wallenstein unretire. When the Swedes involve themselves, Ferdinand II will dig into his bag of tricks, and he will call up Wallenstein, who, since he had retired, had spent much of his time in Prague. Prague is the capital, or what, the largest city of what region? Bohemia. Okay? And so Prague is where Wallenstein had built for himself this layout that I've got for you here on this slide at the bottom. A grand Baroque-style palace that was built just shortly after what other grand Baroque-style palace that we took a tour of? Versailles. Okay, and this was Wallenstein's attempt to show off his wealth and the influence of Baroque style. Okay, so Wallenstein's been kicking back here in his Baroque-style palace. And he will make a lot of money as a result of returning to the battlefield, so he won't be Baroque. All right, so this is I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Hey, let's get together and let's fight against these Habsburgs, and it's perhaps going to backfire on the Swedes. Initially, the Swedes had a great deal of success, but bad luck will follow. What I can tell you is this. Gustavus Adolphus's army mopped Wallenstein's army for the first few battles. The Swedes were led by Gustavus Adolphus, who was seemingly a match for Wallenstein. But Wallenstein will get lucky because Gustavus Adolphus will be killed in battle in 1632. The picture on the top right shows Wallenstein being shot and falling off of the back of his horse. He will die. After moving the fight south to central Germany, Gustavus Adolphus will be killed in battle in 1632. Wallenstein's army had an easy time after the king of Sweden died. The troops very quickly forced the Swedes out of the region. And where were the French, you ask? Well, the French did attempt to engage, but they did not engage in the Holy Roman Empire. Instead, France attacks Spain during this time period. Why would France attack Spain? Think about it. Spain is also Habsburg. And so while they fought, they were trying to keep the Spanish Habsburgs from coming to the central region's aid. Everything basically falls apart after the death of Gustavus Adolphus. And the third phase comes to an end. Wallenstein himself will attempt in 1634 to do what many had anticipated, a rebellion against Ferdinand II. Wallenstein turned on Ferdinand II in hopes of creating a kingdom of his own in Germany. I jokingly would have called it Wallachia, but I don't know what they would have called it. Who knows? Because it never happened. Ferdinand II declares Wallenstein a traitor and has him assassinated. Now, the story of his assassination is pretty grim. Wallenstein's own men were paid a healthy sum to see to the job. He was dragged off his horse, apparently, so the story goes, dragged into the woods and hacked to death with an axe. Yeah. Yeah. And around the same time that Wallenstein was assassinated, German Protestant-affiliated princes made a deal with Ferdinand II to return to the Holy Roman Empire. They did so out of fear. It's interesting. I wonder what they would have done had they known that Wallenstein was not dead. You never know. Okay? Now, once what was an enemy is now an ally, and as a result, we have then the French look at the situation and say, Wallenstein is dead. And if we're going to get involved in this, sometimes you just have to do the work yourself. So the fourth phase comes, it's called the French phase, from 1635 to 1648, with the Swedes out, the Danes making peace. France's hand was now forced. Apparently, France felt that the benefits of victory outweighed the confliction of religion. And so France's Catholics are fighting now against Central Europe's Catholics. When it says he sided with the Protestants, it should say they sided with the Protestants, okay? They sided with the Protestants because the weaker the Habsburg, the stronger the Bourbon, right? And then Louis XIII, along with Richelieu, seemed to believe that the Habsburgs would be tired and easy to beat. This phase of the war is the war's longest, and it's also the most arduous. What does that word mean? Arduous.
Long.
Long?
Difficult.
Difficult? You ever heard the word attrition?
Yes.
Okay? It's not only arduous, it's also atricious. Atricious is dragged out without seemingly an end, kind of like these notes. Okay? That was my failed attempt at humor. It's all right. This war drags on and on and on, okay? There was once a sign that this could have ended with the first phase, but now in the fourth phase, there's no true decisive battles that are victories. It's just a tug of war between two powerhouses at a time. You could imagine this being kind of like a heavyweight boxing match where every round seems to see two boxers just beating the hell out of one another and it not getting anywhere. Like literally, like nobody's falling down, nobody's getting counted out because there is no count out, nobody's falling down. There were enormous casualties on both sides. Civilians suffered too. Weapons were more deadly and armies were larger in this era. And so who suffers the most in war? The commoner. It's the commoner whose food has been taken away from them to feed the army that's encamped in their front lawn or their front yard, their front field. Eventually, without really any benefit to the French or the Habsburgs, warfare winds down finally with something called the Peace of Westphalia. Okay. So how many stages has there been? 4. The first stage was called the Bohemian stage, and it was a civil war based on religion. The second phase was the Danish phase, and it was a weak attempt at the Danes to grab land when they thought they could. The third phase was a phase paid for by French money, where the Swedes would fight. What they were hoping they would get would be northern warm water ports. and they end up losing their king and the battle. And the fourth phase has been a Vietnam, if you will. That's a relation to our world, our United States, or a Afghanistan. A long, arduous, atrocious war without seemingly a lot of success. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia is signed. And there are two slides here at the end of this set of notes that are very important to us. These 6 items, I think it's 6 total, these 6 items are the outcomes of the peace. So this will have religious and political ramifications that will last for centuries. This is one of those documents that defines what Europe is even still to this very day in some ways. First of all, sovereignty. What's the word sovereignty mean?
Someone who has full rule over a nation.
So that's a sovereign. Sovereignty is the idea of the question of rule in a nation, right? So the rule of German princes was recognized, which is why when we go back to the beginning of these sets of notes, I remember Maeve was the one who pointed it out, okay? We had a map that looked to be like Germany or the Central European region was shattered into over 300 principalities. I'll show you a zoomed in version of that very map. This is it. This is Germany, or the Holy Roman Empire, after the Peace of Westphalia. Over 300 different principalities were independent of one another. Now, number 2, the papacy could no longer intervene in German religious issues. The papacy had to agree in the Peace of Westphalia. Yes, guys, the church was a part of this political document, okay? The Pope had to agree that the papacy would no longer intervene in German religious issues, nor could they use the Holy Roman Empire as the agent of their action. Consequently, there is no what going forward. There is no Holy Roman Empire, right? The Peace of Augsburg was reinstituted and Calvinism was added. This nullifies the Edict of Restitution completely. The Protestant provinces were recognized as independent states, and this included Switzerland as well. This is where Switzerland becomes completely independent and remains independent to this day. Sweden, while they didn't win their phase, at the end of the war with this peace agreement, they did receive a large sum of money from the Holy Roman Empire and lands on the Baltic coast in Northern Europe that once belonged to the Holy Roman Empire. Regions here that they still retain, okay, right here. And also some that they once had that they lost again eventually. But these right here became theirs, okay?
With those islands?
Yes.
I thought those are in Danish control right
These were theirs, they're no longer. I'm saying these were theirs, okay? These they had, but they lost, okay? All right. Number 6, France received the Alsace, which I'll show you what the Alsace is here in a second. They also received territories along the Spanish border and territories along the border with the Netherlands. So when we look at this map, again, where's my cursor? There we go. The Alsace is this region right here that's kind of France's lands. All right, the area around it is called the Lorraine. All right, eventually this region right here, all right, of the Alsace, and then around it the Lorraine, Lorraine, I think there's 2 R's, Lorraine. This region will become major in implications between France and Germany in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Why? Because right now it is now France's after this decree. Later in history, it will be taken back by the Germans, and it will then be taken by the French again, and then the Germans, especially after what is discovered there in abundance: coal. This region of Europe is extremely rich in coal. It's like the Appalachian valleys of Kentucky and Pennsylvania. Okay, today that's a big area because there's a massive coal deposit there. right? If you don't know anything about the United States and its economics, coal miners abound in eastern Kentucky because some of the wealthiest coal mines in the world are there. Well, this area in Europe is where some of the wealthiest coal mines are. And why would coal be a big deal in the 18th, 19th, 20th century? Right, industrial fuel, right? Okay, so there's another reason there for this to be a big deal. So the Alsace and Lorraine, and then the Spanish territories, France will, you can't really see it on this map because, well, the map doesn't show Spain's border, but they get for themselves borderlands that become part of France that were once a part of Spain, and then they also receive portions of the Netherlands. Now, the question is this: who benefits the most and who lost the most? Outcomes of the 30 Years' War. France seems to have gained the most. With the victories in war, they seem to have entered at the right time. Guided by Cardinal Richelieu, they seem to have won the most from this war of the combatants. But at what cost? And at what consequence? You know, this class is a class where we do a delicate dance in time. So we're learning about an event or a series of events that implicate events we've already learned about. The Fronde, which we learned about in a previous set of notes. The Fronde was an uprising of French what? Nobles in Paris and in around Paris who were upset with the fact that they were being forced to do what? Well, or pay taxes, right? To pay for this war, okay? When Richelieu dies and Louis XIII takes over, they're not willing to fight Louis XIII. But when Louis XIII dies and Jules Mazarin, the Cardinal Jules Mazarin takes over, they are willing, and that's the Fronde Revolt. What will follow is the move of the Holy Family, the move of the royal family to Versailles, right? With that, what economic woe will follow? How do you pay for Versailles? You have to raise taxes on the third estate. What does that seed eventually? The French Rebellion, right? The French Revolution. So this event, this expense of the 30 Years' War is going to contribute eventually to the French Revolution. The Habsburgs had been rendered virtually irrelevant in Western Europe for the most part. They would, as Noah has pointed out to us before, the Habsburgs will focus on their holdings that they still retained in Austria and Eastern Europe. Okay? This eventually will become known as the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So if we're going to point to who comes out looking the best, I would say it's France. Who comes out looking the worst, I would say it's the Habsburgs in general. And who is in the driver's seat of European political affairs, at least for the time being? The French. Okay? All right. We are done with the war, and then we need to talk about what you need to start studying. Posted study guide is online. I do not have printed copies for you yet. I certainly can have those for you in the next class. I think that it would be best if you started to look over first French absolutism and those notes, and then the stuff on the 30 Years' War. This will be on Thursday, so you've got a little bit of time. In our next class, we'll go over the study guide. Anybody have any questions for me? All right. Well, you're on your own then. Ray, can you turn the lights back on?
Oh crap.
I'm a Z.
How did you? Amen. You know anything about the fall of